Hey, Kawaiicon. I'm errbufferoverfl, but if that's too much for you, you can also call me Beck, Buffy, or that person who did that talk about bullshit jobs. I want to start off this talk a little differently by opening with my thank yous, because this project has been built on other people's generosity and honesty. So thank you to the 118 people who filled out the survey online. Without you, this would have stayed a half-formed pipe dream. To those who sit down for interviews and shared your stories, I won't name you, but you know who you are. Thanks to the Kawaiicon crew for taking a chance on a talk that's probably a bit different to what usually shows up. And a big thank you to my rubber duck Courtney, who finished reading bullshit jobs before I did. And finally, to my friends, family, who have endured months of rambling and scheming, thank you so much. So, as a quick heads up, this talk does include a short clip showing animals in distress, historical photos of chattel and indentured slavery, and reflections on capitalism and burnout. So please take care of yourself as you watch, and it's okay to step out if you need to. So I want to be upfront about where I'm coming from. I'm not a sociologist, and I'm not a policy analyst. I scraped through discrete maths at university, but I am a security engineer by trade, and I've spent nearly a decade fist-fighting computers. The research I did was exploratory and community-driven. The survey was designed to capture personal reflections on work, and while the sample size was small and self-selecting, the point was to encourage reflection and give people the space to anonymously vent with the option to follow up. So while the results aren't statistically representative of the whole security industry, especially outside of the Anglosphere, they offer a snapshot of how people feel about their work, the good, the bad, the bullshit. So when I started this project, I had just begun reading Bullshit Jobs by David Graeber. I thought I knew what I was in for. A few familiar themes, a bit of validation, that comforting sense of academic confirmation that your frustrations make sense. Then I hit a section where Graeber describes hell as a group of people hired to make cabinets who spend their day frying fish instead, badly, and resenting those who still get to make cabinets. It was a passage that hit closer to home than I was expecting. It didn't just describe the pointlessness I'd sometimes felt in my own work, it also described that resentment you can feel watching others do the things you want to do while you're stuck frying metaphorical fish. Later, Graeber makes a comparison that really stuck. If nurses, garbage collectors, or mechanics vanish, the result would be immediate and catastrophic. This idea stuck with me. If my job suddenly disappeared, the results probably wouldn't be immediate or catastrophic. Sure, maybe there'd be one less company with a gap analysis warning them to stop using NTLM for authentication, one less penetration test report flagging outdated JavaScript libraries, and definitely a lot less Jira tickets. Still, if everyone in security disappeared, things would absolutely fall apart quickly. And that became the seed of my hypothesis. Infosec isn't intrinsically bullshit, but it can feel or function that way because of the organizational, structural, and cultural systems around it. And I imagine many of you know that feeling already. It's the same reason that bullshit jobs resonated with so many people. That quiet relief of hearing someone say out loud that your frustrations make sense. And that's what I wanted to do with this project, to give shape to those half-acknowledged feelings that live in Slack messages, in hallway conversations, and late-night pub chats, and maybe start to piece together how we ended up here in the first place. But before I get into that, I want to talk about labour. As late as the Middle Ages, roughly between 1476 and 1500s, much of what we now call wage work was not carried out by free people, but by unfree workers who were forced or coerced into labour. They might have received small payments, but real choice was rare. The global economy at this time ran on a sliding scale of freedom. Chattel slavery, indentured servants, serfs, and debt-bonded labourers moved goods across continents, rode merchant ships, and built empires' wealth. the boundary between job and servitude could be blurry, and I'd argue it still is. Work could both be a livelihood and captivity, and the idea of freely selling your time for money had not yet become normal. Salaried jobs existed, but they were rare and usually reserved for servants or government officers. Many workers were paid, but through food, lodging, or a share of what they produced. Others were able to join guilds, which offered stability and protection, but only for those within their ranks. Guilds dictated who could sell, what could be sold, and even when. Even within these systems, there was always a question of control. Freedom existed only within boundaries set by others: guild rules, trading hours, and market demand. And don't get me wrong, we've always tried to keep track of time, but the fidelity in which we measure and control today, that's new. That shift from owning work to owning time changed everything. Long before the factory whistles and the office clocks, humans used the sun and ritual to mark the day. And as societies grew more complex, they began organising not just labour, but time itself. And Graeber explains that in the ancient world, people could imagine buying a potter as a slave or buying his pots, but absolutely not his time. The idea that someone's hours could be owned or rented and that person's day could belong to someone else just didn't exist at that point. And to understand work today, it's important to understand that the waged week in capitalism didn't evolve naturally from feudalism. It was imposed through enclosure and control. In the 14th and 15th centuries, peasants across Europe rebelled against the feudal order. They wanted to end unpaid labour and taxes demanded by lords in the church. After these uprisings were crushed, nobles and merchants rebuilt power through enclosure, fencing off common lands, burning villages, and replacing pastures with private areas. With no land left to live on, people had to sell their labour to survive. And religion reinforced this transformation. When rulers dissolved monasteries and seized church lands, the shared ethic of community gave way to a new theology and prized discipline, obedience, and constant work. Industriousness became a sign of grace, and idleness became sin. So while enclosure made labour necessary, religion made it moral. And capitalism required workers who believed their labour was proof of virtue. To survive, peasants had to work longer and harder each year, extracting more from the land and from themselves. Their survival depended on output and efficiency, turning neighbours into competitors. And that moral logic still shapes us. We've simply renamed it Fordism, Taylorism, scientific management, and hustle culture. But the underlying message is the same. Disciplined, measurable, efficient work is a sign of worth. Modern management systems inherited the same moral architectures that once linked work to godliness. So when we talk about burnout, meaningless jobs, or productivity hacks, we're not describing something new. We're living through the aftershocks of centuries of moral and technological conditioning that taught us that our value lies in how we spend our hours. The combination of religious, technological, and economic forces created a culture where the efficient use of time is not only profitable, but righteous. But I think the key takeaways from this are that this is one of the shortest histories of how time and labour became intertwined. As these changes took hold, older ways of working that followed daylight and seasons were recast as inefficient, even immoral. Workers eventually stopped debating whether time could be bought and sold and began fighting over the terms instead. Hourly rates, fixed contracts, paid overtime, 12-hour days that later became 8-hour days. And the irony here is that in demanding limits, workers also reinforce the idea that when you sell your labour, the buyer owns every single minute of it. As legal historian Robert Steinfeld wrote, all labour contracts are designed to bind a worker in one way or another to fulfil obligations that they have undertaken. And so now we're here, inheriting a system that rationalises and moralises every moment of our time. Yet beneath that history, one thing stands out clearly from my interviews. No matter how much people felt about their jobs, whether they be bullshit, sometimes bullshit, or never bullshit, they shared one need. And that was the need to have effect, that they can enact change on the world and see its response. And there are a lot of theories about why humans human. Hull said it's because we're hungry. Kant said it's because we're moral. Freud said it was because we're horny and terrified. Maslow said it's because we're trying to become our best selves. But they all circle one same truth. We're driven by the need to act on the world and to cause change. And in 1901, psychologist Carl Groos called this the pleasure of being the cause. He noticed that infants are delighted when they realize they can make things happen. Throw food, make noise, summon the big human. It's our first power trip and the first lesson that our actions have impact. Psychiatrist Francis Bruchek built on this idea and called its absence the trauma of failed influence. And that's when our sense of agency is withdrawn. The result is rage, refusal, and retreat. You see it in zoo animals pacing their cages and in adults trapped in systems where their actions make no visible difference. The same pattern appeared in the survey. Of 118 responses, 5 said their job is bullshit, 58 said sometimes, 54 said no. One senior penetration tester said every day felt pointless, that nobody cared about security, only about ticking compliance boxes. When asked what felt most meaningful, they said none of it. An incident responder echoed that the industry is more about money and appearances than improvement. Yet, they still valued the rare moments where clients listened and changed. Those small wins really did matter. And these people are people who care deeply about their work, but are trapped in a system that dulls its impact. They haven't lost purpose, only the ability to see it reflected back. At the other end, with people who said that their work isn't bullshit, we're often in senior roles where autonomy and visibility make outcomes tangible. One CISO told me, I see risks being mitigated by the collaboration I foster. That link between cause and effect helps keep meaning alive. Another consultant found joy in small victories, helping less technical users feel secure without even realizing it. A threat detection engineer said, being able to see the direct impact we're having keeps me satisfied. When that visibility goes, I start looking for other work. That is the pleasure of being the cause in practice, tracing a clear line between effort and change. And the extremes are so easy to understand. Those whose work clearly matters and those who feel trapped in obvious bullshit. The hard part sits in between, among people who said sometimes they know that their work matters but can't always see the difference it makes. A CISO from New Zealand said their job does make a difference, but they're not too sure their managers see it that way. A head of security in Australia said the rewarding part is improving detection. But in the same breath, they described the most bullshit part as endless compliance debates. A security architect spoke of the sting when others dismissed their work as pointless. And a principal engineer in the US captured the paradox. Bureaucracy feels meaningless, yet sometimes the same bureaucracy drives real change. When effort and outcome disconnect, well-being begins to erode. Over time, that erosion damages not only motivation, but identity and self-worth. We see this in the case of Lawrence van Wassenhove, who sued her employer after being paid for 20 years but given no work. Van Wassenhove was trained a HR specialist who was diagnosed with epilepsy and a form of partial paralysis. Her employer reassigned and eventually sidelined her after a corporate takeover. Being paid not to work is not a privilege, she said. And her story is an extreme version of what many people quietly endure, the slow disappearance of purpose. And while disability justice isn't today's focus, it's important to highlight that disability justice reminds us how deeply this belief in productivity runs. The idea that worth equals output, that rest must be earned, and that those who cannot keep up are lesser. And it's the same moral logic that fuels your bullshit job. Perform productivity no matter how hollow. And that slow erosion of purpose begins as fatigue, becomes cynicism, then detachment. When you can no longer see the impact you have on the world, identity itself starts to decay. And burnout appeared again and again in the responses. A red teamer who didn't believe their job was bullshit reflected, "I was doing 70-hour weeks and saw no meaningful change." An engineering manager from Australia said, "The better my environment got, the more burnt out I became." And those complaints aren't about workload. In most cases, people spoke with passion about their work. Their complaint was about how much they put in for little to no return. As Bruchek would put it, it's another form of the trauma of failed influence. Once this happens, a moral loop begins. We tell ourselves to stay grateful, to endure, to treat exhaustion as proof of worth. Leadership expects constant learning and unpaid overtime. The industry tells us, come for the passion, stay for the burnout. That's where right scolding comes in. It's the moral policing that happens when someone expresses dissatisfaction and is told not to complain. It sounds like you just need to find your path. It's what you make of it. Or worse, that old refrain, "If people just tried harder." These lines echo the same logic that blamed Van Wassenhove for not leaving. If your work feels meaningless, the problem must be with you. And right scolding is an echo of the Protestant work ethic, the idea that endurance equals virtue and that suffering proves moral worth. What makes it so insidious is it's so easy to turn inward. Instead of resisting systems that deny agency, rest, and care, we rationalize them as finding passion or pushing through or just trying harder. We work through lunch because it won't take long. We stay back to finish one more thing. We convince ourselves that these small sacrifices show commitment. But right scolding only works when we're isolated, when we start comparing notes and realize everyone else is tired too. The illusion cracks. Exhaustion stops feeling like a personal failure and starts looking like a shared condition. Right scolding also reflects the limits of our imagination. It thrives when we can't picture anything different. Sometimes that's because imagining change feels risky, or because we fear losing what stability we have. And sometimes it's simply because we've never experienced a world where rest and worth are not rationed. If your adult life has been lived in debt, it's hard to imagine the freedom beyond the next repayment. If your self-worth depends on performance, it's hard to know who you would be without that. If slowing down has always brought punishment, it's hard to believe that rest could ever be safe. And part of the challenge is also confusing a life without work for a life without labour. Who will grow the food, stock the shelves, or keep computers secure? I don't believe coercion is required for people to do these things. Many would stay because they love the craft themselves. Yes, even stocking the shelves. And trials of universal basic income and 4-day work week show this. When people have a choice, they don't stop working. They work better, healthier, and with more purpose. And if that feels too far away for you, that is okay. Imagination takes energy, and not everyone has the luxury of it. But imagination is where change begins. So this is the part. where I talk about how we fix all of this, right? Well, maybe not fix it entirely, because the system is unfortunately working exactly the way it was designed to. But what we can do is we can fight for each other and push back where we can, make small cracks and catch the people who are falling through them. Because none of this is really our fault. This system is centuries old, built on extraction and domination, and it's designed to make resistance feel futile. The fact, though, that it is old does not make it inevitable. Any human being's system can be changed by us. But don't worry, I'm not calling for a full revolution. But if you are interested, there is a sign-up sheet going around after the talk. I think there are a lot of steps that we can take between here and those bigger visions. Individualism is not going to save us, and you cannot self-care your way out of structural exploitation. But we also can't wait for someone else to fix it. Collective change begins with individual refusal. The decision to reset expectations, draw boundaries, and remember that you are a person and not a resource. And not everything I'm going to suggest will be possible for everyone. Time, money, health, and access matter. So take what's useful and leave the rest behind. None of this is prescriptive, it's just a start. First, you need to start by taking your goddamn lunch breaks. Ideally every day, people. Step away from your desk, sit outside, touch some grass, curse out the fucking day star. Then start and finish work on time. Not for emergencies or on call. I mean the days that you stay back just to finish that PR or try one more payload. Those things can wait. Every time you log off on time, that's a small act of refusal. Join a community. And notice I said join, not build. Building community is really hard, so you have to start smaller. Find one that already exists and show up. A local club, a meetup, a creative group, a political collective, or, and this isn't a segue, maybe just a little bit, your union. Go be bad at pottery. Be mediocre at community theatre. Draw cursed noodle hands at a life drawing class. The point isn't to get good, it's to get free. When no one is grading your output, you start to remember what curiosity and play actually feel like. Next up, you need to learn your rights. One really quiet form of resistance is legal literacy. And you don't need to be an employment lawyer, but if that is your thing, that's perfectly fine. But you just need to know the basics that protect you and help others learn them too. If you don't know your rights, you can't tell when they're being eroded. For example, I recently learned that in Australia, once you earn above the high income threshold, you may lose unfair dismissal protections if you're not covered by an award. And a lot of people think that they're being protected when really they've been priced out of that. And knowledge is not everything, but it certainly is a start. Join a union. Unions are about collective protection in a system built on isolation. Whether you're a contractor, a consultant, in Australia, even managers can join unions. If you're an engineer, being part of one gives you language, leverage, and most importantly, community. Unions help with unreasonable workloads or hours, bullying, pay gaps, restructure, and even ethical dilemmas like being asked to build something harmful. Unions won't be able to solve all of your employment problems, but they can make sure that someone is in the room with you and that you're not being taken for a ride. And I wish I could say that it's easy and you'll feel amazing making all of these changes every day. For some of us, the process of breaking up with work is really scary. You might feel like you're going to get in trouble. And don't be surprised if not only managers try and right scold you, but also your colleagues. You might even start to feel shame for not paying attention to security news or working on projects 24/7. You might feel like you're a bad person, and if you're going through the process of learning a new skill, like drawing noodle fingers, you're honestly probably going to feel even worse. Your inner cop might even try and tell you that you're lazy and you're not working as hard as your colleagues. You might even switch to feeling like your colleagues are working too much and they're bad for enforcing the same structures that we're talking about today. You might even want to scold them. But it's important to remember that refusal isn't just about what we stop doing, it's also about what we start expecting. When we lower our expectations, we make it easier for the system to keep running as is. So, is Infosec a bullshit job? I honestly don't know. After 118 survey responses, I don't think so, but it's also very complicated. There are problems. People are burnt out. People don't want to be here anymore. But it's not for me to decide if an entire industry is bullshit based on that. What I do know is this: we can't wait for the system to do better before we do. We should stop calling other people's work bullshit just because we don't see value in it. And we need to take care of each other properly without guilt or shame. And we need to stop glorifying overwork and start supporting each other in setting boundaries, resting, and seeing our worth beyond just productivity. If meaning comes from being the cause, from seeing our actions ripple outward, then change begins the same way, with small, deliberate movements made side by side, each of us taking one step, then another, until the ground begins to shift. If this resonated with you, or you'd like to dig deeper, I'll be publishing an extended version of this talk and the anonymized survey data, everything except for long-form comments, on my blog soon. And if you want to chat more about bullshit jobs, you can come find me around the con. Thank you.